The one thing you need to know about poison ivy is that washing it off within 10 or even 30 minutes of getting exposed saves you a lot of pain. It makes it less likely for you to develop a rash because once the rash develops, it's a little too late, and the rash of poison ivy is so distressing. I'm Dr. Nkeiruka, a pediatrician and pediatric ER doctor, and I see this rash a lot once spring comes along. In this video, we're going to talk about how you can avoid poison ivy, how you can prevent the rash from developing, and also how you can treat the rash once it develops. And make sure you stick around to the end of the video where I'm going to talk about a cream that works great for removing the oil from the skin once you've come in contact with poison ivy. Poison ivy, like other plants, bloom during the spring, which is why we tend to see it a lot during the spring and also the summer. And you can identify it as something we call leaves of three, but we also say leave it be because it is not your friend. It also has buddies, which is like poison ivy, poison oak, poison sumac. Depending on the location you are, you may see different types of it. So it may not necessarily be poison ivy, but they all do the same thing. These three dangerous buddies make an oil which we call urushiol, and that's the oil that when it comes in contact with your skin, creates a reaction that now manifests the symptoms that we typically see, which is itching, redness, swelling, and total discomfort for anyone that has it. Even though a lot of people mention it presents as redness, people with darker skin like mine, they notice more darkening because you can't necessarily see redness on the dark skin pigment. The easiest way to prevent poison ivy rash or poison ivy is by not getting exposed to it. And this involves knowing what the plants look like so that way you or your child cannot get exposed to it. And you can go around the environment, depending on where you live, to actually uproot and remove the plant because younger kids may not necessarily know the difference. And while playing outside, they might be exposed. But if your child gets exposed to it, and you know it's poison ivy, here are a few things you can do to prevent the symptoms from manifesting. You want to immediately remove all the clothing that got exposed. We're talking clothes, gloves, shoes, socks, because you want to remove anything that makes you in contact with the oil as soon as possible. Then you want to wash. Like I mentioned before, the target is to wash within 10 to 30 minutes. But even if it's longer, it doesn't hurt to wash, although the likelihood of reducing the rash incidence might be a little bit lower. And when I'm talking about washing, I don't mean just a little bit of mouth soap. You want to use a washcloth and mouth soap and water and actually scrub because you want to get the oil. Just like when you imagine oil on the skin, it takes a little bit of washing to get it out. It's just about the same thing. So you want to scrub gently but firmly to get that off the skin so that way the rash does not manifest. There are some over-the-counter products that people say are good for washing up poison ivy oil, but honestly, time is important. So once you get exposed, you don't have to run to the store. Just grab some mouth soap and water in your environment and just wash it off as soon as possible. And that works really great. So you wash it off, but not fast enough, or unfortunately you still develop a rash. So what can you do? Here are a few things you can do to help the relief of the rash or the symptoms you might develop from poison ivy. Soothing techniques. So this will not treat the rash, it just kind of makes you feel better. So we're talking putting a cold rag on top of the area, oatmeal baths, calamine lotion. Calamine lotion usually helps a lot, but it depends on where you're going. If you're going outside, you may not necessarily want like the pink and white stain like sticking out. So you can put that in places you cannot see, but calamine lotion usually helps a lot to give some cooling effect and some relief. Or maybe like cool showers, that can also help with the itching because you really don't want to scratch around. And that's the next one. You do not want to scratch the rash because the more you do, the more the cycle continues and the more the distress continues. So one, soothing techniques, and again, do not scratch the rash. You want to clip the nails so that way they're not constantly scratching because it's always tempting to scratch. But if they scratch and they have like longer nails, they're more likely to cause excoriations, which may then get to go infected. Of course, saving the best for the last, you want to start steroid cream as soon as possible. A lot of evidence state that when you start the steroid cream before the blisters develop, actually helps the blisters not develop, and steroid cream will generally help with inflammation. Over-the-counter steroid cream, the 1% hydrocortisone, which you see over-the-counter, helps, but depending on how extensive you or a child's rash is, you may talk with a regular physician because we have what we call higher potency one that works great, so you may use that for the rash, but over-the-counter ones is definitely a good place to start. One important thing I want you to know is that depending on the location of the rash, especially over the face, the genitals, or significantly extensive, talk to you or your child's doctor so that way you can get prescription for oral steroids. Topical steroids we use for some smaller places, not really on the face, but when it's extensive, oral steroids are needed. And when we recommend oral steroids, we typically give it as a taper dose, which means you start at a higher dose and decrease the dose, because we give this over 2 to 3 weeks. So when it's over the face or in the genitals or extensive, you need to be talking to your doctor, because the topical steroids may not be working effectively to help you get the relief or help treat the rash from poison ivy. So I'm going to now switch gears and answer a few questions I got on social media for poison ivy. And don't forget to follow me on social media. I always do a lot of Q&As and get some questions that I also answer here. So one says, does poison ivy spread to the rest of the body? So no, contrary to popular belief, because different parts of the skin has different thickness, like the face has a different thickness from the thighs, it may start developing on the face or the upper extremity, which is the arms, before the legs. So let's say your child may develop the rash today, and over the next 2 to 3 days, you notice it on the legs, and it makes you seem like it's spreading. No, it just means that the oil is still penetrating the skin and the chemical reaction is still happening. So it's not uncommon for kids to develop rashes over a couple of hours or days, but it's not spreading. Poison ivy does not, it's not infectious, it doesn't spread. It only has to do with when you come in contact with the oil, and then it manifests in different places at different times. Number 2 is really be related to number 1. It says, is poison ivy, the flu from poison ivy blisters, contagious? No, poison ivy is not infectious. It's not like impetigo, the other bacterial infection that once you come in contact with the fluid, you also get it. No, the person must be exposed to the oil urushiol for them to get poison ivy rash. Another question says, what about Neosporin cream? So Neosporin cream is a triple antibiotic, which causes a lot of allergic reaction in people, in kids. About 11 to 15% of people get allergic reaction from Neosporin. So we don't even recommend the one for poison ivy or for any like first aid wounds. You can use only single antibiotics. In my first aid container, what contains in my first aid, I mentioned bacitracin, if you want to go watch that video. And if you have a cut, you can use bacitracin. You do not actually need antibiotic ointment for poison ivy unless we're suspecting it's getting infected, and then we treat differently. If you're noticing it's getting like filled with fluids that look yellow, angry, like it's weeping, then you might talk with your doctor, see if you need antibiotic cream. But Neosporin will not be my first option because it causes allergic reaction and can actually make your rash worse. If you stuck around to the end of the video, this is awesome. And I told you guys I was going to talk about a cream. So there is a cream called Zanfel. It's actually a cream that is it's expensive, but it's very useful. What it does is it binds to the oil, which is a urushiol that comes from poison ivy, and it brings it to the surface so you can wash it out. Like say you get exposed, developing some rash. It is a cream that actually works. I've seen a lot of people who use it and it gives them a lot of relief even when the rash has progressed. So yes, I want you to talk with your doctor to see if it helps for you or your child's poison ivy. I hope this has been helpful. Tell me in the comments if you or your child has ever had poison ivy, what treatments worked for you, what didn't really work. Did you need to get oral steroids based on the location that you had it? And of course, don't forget to subscribe. If you have not watched my video where I talk about things I have in my medicine box, the first aid box, spring is around the corner. You may have to go do spring cleaning. Click this link so that way you can get to the video and see what I use for my kids, what I have in my first aid box. And again, thanks for being here. Don't forget to subscribe.